In my lifetime, in our lifetimes, we have never seen a power being comparable to the United States in power.
Yes.
We saw the Soviet Union, but they were not economically powerful. And it's very, very apparent that there's that rivalry and conflict between them.
So China, Ray, what are they getting right relative to us? And what would you say China's getting right that most Americans don't appreciate and understand?
Oh, okay. I've been going to China for 39 years. I started in 1984, soon after Deng Xiaoping came to power, and I've been very lucky. They didn't have any money. I didn't go for money.
Right.
I went for curiosity, and then I really got to be part of helping them build a system and so on and so forth. So since I started to go, per capita income has increased by 28 times. Life expectancy's increased by 10 years. The poverty rate has gone from 88%, hungry poverty, to less than 1%. These kinds of things. And what they got right was the reform. And they did it in a symbiotic relationship with the United States, in which essentially they sold us inexpensive, good value goods that we preferred the prices of, and they lent us the money to do it. It's a difficult relationship. I studied the dynasties going back over 2,000 years, and what they have they're intelligent, they have a work ethic. It's semi-Confucian, meaning that they're, orderly, intelligent, hardworking people. Those basic elements they've got right. They had it the easy way because they started with, when they closed the door.
Right.
From 1949 until 1978, they closed the door, so they got really backwards, and so that bounced. But they have a population that's more than 4 times the size of the United States, so when you get to have income, let's say, that's half the United States, and you have an economy that's twice the United States.
Yes.
So there's a great deal of that. I would say they're orderly, they're disciplined, they're hardworking, they can be very creative. There are different cultures within China. The Southern is more the business community, whatever.
Open to the world.
And so on. I think that one of the things that is not understood is how the Confucian way of thinking affects their foreign policy.
How so?
Confucianism is an idea of how a family should operate. That within your family, you are controlling your family. You have the right, be a good, you have these rules. Then you interact with others. So it's an extension of that. They view that within China, that is their family. They call it's an extended family. The word country in China has 2 Chinese characters, which is state, family. Okay, so, and then that also is why it's autocratic, because it's very much top down, and like strict parents operating that way. When they're dealing with the outside world, a man, I think that we both know, Wang Qishan, who was just the vice president of China and so on, described to me, he said this idea of taking over and proselytizing other countries in which you want to, it just doesn't work. If you're going to occupy and you're taking away their basic rights, that Vietnam doesn't work, Afghanistan doesn't work, and he said that was the development of the Mediterranean culture, and he described that up really to the Peace of Westphalia when they had 30 years war, and then we came up with the idea that we would make a country and we would make borders, and that with those within the borders would control how they did things, and those outside. So when we think of it, I think they want to be as competitive and do as well as they can, but when you ask how do we misunderstand, I think this idea of fight and conquer is not the same. It is more of a hierarchical thing in which those who become more powerful are more powerful, need to be more respected. And then there's a relationship, which is almost a vassal state relationship, those around them. And there's a way that those who are powerful should deal with those who are less powerful.
Right.
And those who are less powerful should deal with those who are more powerful. That is sort of a mutual respect and that. So I don't think they're out to conquer the world, and I don't think they're out to have a military power.
So let me ask a country that didn't figure in here, but another big power, Russia. How do you see Russia today in terms of the very patterns and attributes of successful countries? How do you look at Putin's Russia today?
Well, even before, very interesting. I took all of these indicators, and I could forecast pretty well with them the next 10 years growth rates. And I could, if anybody wants to see them, they're in the back of the book, and they're also, I update them for you online, so you could see them. And what Russia had, they basically had a cultural problem in terms of corruption, disorder, fragmentation, all the elements that you say where you have equal education, you educate your population well, alcoholism as a problem in terms of those types of things. Their strengths was they didn't get much in debt, but they didn't have a creativity and all of that technology development. They had nothing. They became they're a big resource exporter and so on. So that's it. You take that away. So they didn't have the elements that I'm describing. In other words, the building of the quality education, the inventiveness, and all of that problem in terms of that. So that existed before, and then we have this real screw up to make this kind of move.
That's right.
I mean, it's a very, very bleak situation. Yes. And one might have said when after World War II, or even all through many of our years, that if you were to look at Russia and you were to look at China, you would say, okay, well, maybe you'd bet on Russia into that. But these cultural issues in terms of indicators, like there's a negative 54% correlation between corruption and the country's next 10-year growth rates. So these are the problems.
Ray, if Kevin McCarthy and President Biden invited you into the Oval Office right now, said, we both read your book, we see those curves, China going this way and us going that way. What can we do in the near term?
Okay. First of all, smart bipartisanship.
Yeah. What's number two? But no, I know what you mean. Without that, there's really nothing.
We can re-engineer things. In other words, there's a certain amount of debt. How do you deal with the debt, and how do you deal with the payments on that debt? How much is going to be monetized? How much is going to be whatever it is? How do you raise productivity so that it benefits the majority of the people? Let's say basic things like education, then civility of the population. In other words, these basics that we're talking about. How do you do that? I basically think that if we had a strong middle, if you had smart, bipartisan people from the middle,
govern the country from the middle out,
who fought for what they agreed on, and so on, and were inventive, I think that they could deal with it. I worry about the extremes. I worry about the extremes, the rich, the poor, the lack of opportunity, and so on. So I think smart bipartisanship. If they said I would get together and we will deal with the extremes, and I think that what you need is a Manhattan Project plan. In other words, take 6 months and bring those people together and make them make an agreement of how that thing works. They don't come out of that until they have an agreement of how that thing works. I think smart people could engineer a lot in order to make that, and I almost don't care what they've come up with. If it's smart and they're bipartisan, and then they fight the opposite extremes, I think we'd make a lot of progress.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. Ray, you alluded to India. A lot of people, think India may be the real winner between the competition between China and the United States. What do you see the strengths and weaknesses of India in terms of your framework?
The indicators give a 10-year projected growth rate. India has the highest projected growth rate. And the reason is, some of the indicators are the cost of an educated person. Okay, education's very important, but in many places, an educated person can be very expensive.
Right.
In India, they have very low cost of an educated person. Okay, so that means that's powerful.
Yeah.
Okay, the level of indebtedness. If you have a high level of indebtedness, you're going to probably have a problem. They have very low levels of indebtedness. Technology development. We're seeing big leaps forward in terms of how this incredibly poor country that doesn't have toilets and whatever is going to technology development in many ways. This inventiveness and so on. So it has, if I was to go many of those types of things. Within this country, they have wonderful education, they have wonderful family, they have, there are more millionaires in India than there are in the United States or anywhere really. So the ability to have that middle class and to rise. And then we go back to the basics, 3 basics. Are you earning more than you're spending?
As a country.
Yeah. Well, and it's good for an individual too.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you earning more than you're spending? Are you working well together, or are you fighting with each other internally? And are you at risk of a war externally? If you take those criteria, those basic things, your financial condition is good. You earn more than you spend, so your income statement and balance sheet are good. You're not at war with internally, so you don't have the disruption. And you're not at war externally, okay? You're in a good place.
Well, what I like about your...
And the other thing about it, just one more point is, if you look at the history of wars, there's the winners, the losers, and the neutral countries. The neutral countries, economically and by almost all measures, their markets, their investments, do better than even the winners. And if you're a loser, you're wiped out, okay?
So we've got some questions from the audience. Since you wrote the book, ChatGPT has come out, and we've had this great leap forward in AI. How do you think that can or will change the criteria, especially for China, which it's got its own AI, but how does AI figure in now to your thesis?
Well, it is a tremendously powerful resource, not just in terms of giving you information, but I know somebody in terms of computer programming, vast amounts, it says, go find the mistake in the programming and they can go into it. And it's an incredibly powerful thing. So how it's used is the most important thing. And there are no regulations.
Right.
So the problem isn't with the technology, the problem is with the people. And so when we have this war, okay, are we going to use it to improve mankind, or are we going to use it to fight? So we're in this environment in which this incredibly powerful force is not regulated, nor any prospect of regulation. And we are in an environment of conflict in which most likely, I worry that this would be weaponized, and there's not an easy way around it because there's no world government or anything like that. Now, you're exactly right with China being behind on this. They're behind for 2 reasons. First of all, the chip development is 2 to 4 years behind on this type of chip. And they're worried about this because in that 2 to 4 years, there's going to be a tremendous amount of learning that they'll be behind on just because of the chip development. And then it's exactly right, as you say. It used to be that when you can get all the information, because they could get all the information, all the data on everybody, on everything, right? And you put AI on that, wow, that was a powerful alternative. Plus, they have 8 times as many engineers, computer engineers, and you figure, wow, what a competitive advantage.
And they really helped them on healthcare. They did a lot on, and on facial recognition because they didn't have privacy regulations.
Batteries and all sorts of things, just amazing. But when you have this impermeable bubble or something, just as you're referring, and you can't get information in, or even that whole notion, and you're 2 years behind in terms of the technology, it's a problem. And I want to emphasize that if we take the next 18 months to 2 years, this is going to be a period of great disorder, I think.
I agree with you.
Because we have in our tightening of the financials, we have the tightening and not yet the consequences. So you just think of a normal business cycle.
Just explain that to the audience. Just what we're having a tightening, and yet we haven't seen the consequences. I think people would be interested in that.
There are these cycles, recession, growth, recession, stimulation, growth, prosperity, gets too hot, unemployment's too low, tighten monetary policy, tighten stock market goes down, and then the economy goes down. Those on average have lasted 7 years, give or take about 3 years. And since 1945, when the new system, the new order came about, there's been 12 and a half of those. So we're in the start of the cycle right now where they have tightened the monetary policy.
Interest rates
they have had the costs of those types of things. And at the part of the cycle where just credit is beginning to fall and the consequences of that are going to happen. And that will move us into the next 18 months, in terms of the normal consequences of that, meaning a worse economy,
lower profits, more unemployment.
Those kinds of issues. Going into elections. Now, in elections, we have a great deal of polarity. And you put together that with this other, and you have the wealth gap, the rich, the poor, and so on.